Hey everyone, it's Rob Ryder here. It's January 8th, 2012. My email address is courtofrecord@aol.com. Going to be looking at a couple of books today and really trying to drive a nail in this coffin to keep the dead there and have them leave us alone. And a lot of this started because I had tried to unregister my land, my body, with the certificate of live birth, which in my opinion is the owner's certificate of title, by taking it to the county and trying to find the register of titles. In Michigan, you won't find that name used or that title being used but in 1917 it was, and it said that you would take the owner's certificate of title to the register of titles, endorse the back, and execute it like a deed. And so that's what I did, and I wrote a public record that I'll show you in a little bit. And I took my record of live birth as evidence that I was alive. And I went to find the register of titles. Well, like I said, we don't use that term anymore, but we do use the term abstractor. And somebody from Pennsylvania said, well, they were told that the abstractor is what they call the register of titles in Pennsylvania. And in the statutes of Michigan, it says that normally it's the register of deeds. Therefore, that's the office I went to looking for the abstractor, which of course got the cross-eyed look of the counter troll. And so I talked to her for a little bit. I said, well, look, sister, you're really not helping me. Can I see your boss? She went in an office and came back and tried to get me to leave again. And I said, no, I really want to see him. And so out came the chief deputy register of deeds. And, on went the show again. And I couldn't get him. He was really, really hesitant when I said the word abstractor to even go there. And finally I said, well, listen, brother, you're not helping me either. You're just the deputy. I want to talk to the person who was elected and took an oath to hold this office. Well, she's not here right now. Well, fine. Call her. And so he did. He went and made a phone call. And he came back and said, well, I'm sorry, she's in court right now. Which, I wasn't really surprised. I said, oh, so you're telling me that she's the clerk of the court of records? And he said, yes, she wears many hats. I said, well, excellent. Then I'm serving her these papers through you, as I have a public record under the seal of the court of record, under her seal as the clerk of the court of record, saying that what I'm doing is lawful. And she's going to have to explain to me why I can't do what I'm asking. Well, she's just going to return them to you. I said, brother, I don't care what she does. I've accepted her oath, and I'm going to leave it at that and consider her served. And so I left. About 5 days later, I got my papers back with a form from the deeds office, where they would usually check off what was wrong with your stuff. There was nothing checked off. It just went to the notes section, and in the notes it said, suggest seeking counsel expert in real estate law. That was from the Register of Deeds. And so I went to look at what the word counsel meant in Bouvier's, and it said same as counselor in law, and I went and looked at counselor at law, and you can go look at this stuff yourself, but a counselor at law with 2 L's is different than a counselor at law with 1 L. So at the time I thought, okay, who could this be? And looked at the attributes they had to have. They had to be appellate qualified, so they had to have this certain level of being an attorney. And a number of other things. But I also had remembered this particular chapter in Blackstone's, Book 1, Chapter 5, where it talks about the king and his councils. And in Section 4, it talks about the principal council belonging to the king is his privy council, which is generally called, by the way of eminence, the council. So I decided to start reading this. Again, haven't not read it for a few months. Did I cover that last part? Yeah, I think I did. I got kind of a cold, so I'm really trying to push this through and get it done. So bear with me. So this is what's in Blackstone's Book 1, Chapter 5, Section 4. And we're not going to read the whole thing. You can read it yourself, right? But it says in the ancient times, this king and his council was 12 or thereabouts. Well, was Jesus and his apostles until Judas did his thing, and then it was 11. So the first Privy Council was Jesus and the apostles. Jesus sitting as the king. So since then, we move forward in time, and the Privy Council at some point after 1679 was 15 were to be the principal counselors of state. And this is the part I missed before. And those to be counselors by virtue of office. And the other 15 were composed of 10 lords, 5 commoners of the king's choosing. So, after reading this again, I said, well, okay, the counselor, the privy counselor I need is already there by virtue of his office. But, what does that mean? So he's not an attorney sitting in an office someplace, although they have a lot of these attributes. They don't have them all. And it was going through again and say, okay, what are all the things a guy needs to have to be called a privy counselor? And so let's go on the journey. Okay, and also that at some point they came up with a guy who's going to be the president of the council. All right, well, that's fine. Well, what is a privy counselor? Are made by king's nomination without either patent or grant. Now, judges are nominated. So a probate judge is nominated. And when you think about it, if we're all the kings, we elect these people. So they've been nominated by the kings, King''S. As in all of us kings have nominated this guy to be our privy counselor. And then he had an election. So in another book we're going to look at, which is even older than Blackstone's, it's according to Lord Coke, Institutes of the Laws of England, Part 4, number 70, the Court of the King's Bench. Only one Chief Justice has his office without grant or patent. So when you go to an older book, remember Blackstone's written in the 17th century, he's taking something written in the early 16th century or mid-16th century and updating it with his information. So let's hope he's added a little bit, which he has, but by the same token, it's always better to go back and look at the original. But let's give Blackstone his due. What other hints did he give us? Well, so this Privy Council we're looking for, he's going to have an oath of office. And you see that number 11 right there? That's what got me to go look at what the site was, and it said 4 INST 53, which is Book 4 of this Institute of Laws, Section 53. And this is the oath, the things the oath would contain that this privy counselor is going to take. To advise the king according to the best of his cunning and discretion. To advise the king's honor and good of the public without partiality, through affection, love, need, doubt, or dread. To keep the king's counsel secret. To avoid corruption. To help strengthen the execution of what shall be there resolved. To withstand all persons who would attempt the contrary. And lastly, in general, to observe, keep, and do all that's good and true counselor ought to do to his sovereign lord. I like the guy already. Let's go find him. So this Privy Council also has a lot of other powers, right? And when you start reading through these, the power of the Privy Council is to inquire into all offenses against the government and commit offenders to the custody, take their trial in some of the courts of law, but their jurisdiction is only to inquire and not to punish. So you can see that we're starting to say, okay, this Privy Council has to have certain powers, and we're going to identify them. But then it gets really interesting because we talk about the Star Chamber. Now, back in the time of Lord Coke, the Star Chamber existed. By the time of Blackstone, it's gone away, and they say in here that it's gone away. And now it's illegal for them to have cognizance in matters of property. Well, apparently before that they could. But so the Court of Star Chamber and the Court of Requests, both of which consisted of privy counselors, were dissolved. However, but in plantation or amity causes which arise out of the jurisdiction of the kingdom, and in matters of lunacy and idiocy, being the special flower of the prerogative with regards to these, Although they may eventually involve questions of extensive property, the Privy Council continues to have cognizance. So it still has cognizance over property in certain cases. Lunacy and idiocy. And if we go to what used to be the Probate Code of 1939 for Michigan, is now called the Estates and Protected Individuals Code, Act 386, 1998. The court means a probate court, or an applicable the family division of the circuit court. An incapacitated individual means an individual who's impaired by reason of mental illness, mental deficiency, physical illness, or disability. So the court that handles that's the probate court. Let's put one in the probate court section. Somebody keep track. When also there's a question arises between two provinces in America or elsewhere, or concerning the extent of their charters and the like, the king and his council exercises original jurisdiction therein upon the principles of feudal sovereignty. Well, and so likewise, when any person claims an island or a province in the nature of a feudal principality, by grant from the king or his ancestors, the determination of that right belongs to his majesty and council. So to have that right determined, it's our right to have it done in council, because we're the majesty in this case. Properly speaking, this term can only be applied to God. However, sometimes it means power, as when we say the majesty of the people. And a feudal principality is a monarchical, feudatory, or sovereign state. Well, we're sovereign nation states by definition. In the law of nations, a sovereign state is a nation in any form whatsoever that's self-governing. And you look at the definition of nation, and it's to be born. So to be born and self-governing makes you a sovereign nation state, small s state. So they're talking about you. So if you claim this island, this piece of property that the Creator gave you, your earthen vessel, your island, whatever you want to call it, by a grant from the king or his ancestors, so the King of Kings gave you an inheritance, and your ancestors gave you an inheritance, they gave you the earthen vessel, and you are from the Creator. So this just goes in more to the kinds of things that this court is going to have jurisdiction with. Now, I like this, that to hear allegations and proofs. Well, probate is proving a deed. It's not proving a will. A will is just a form of a deed. Probate is a way of proving a deed. And deeds in common law were used for contracts and conveyances. And conveyances mean land, real estate. And I'm looking for somebody who's an expert in real estate law, according to what the clerk of the courts told me. Yeah, let's see if there's anything else here in this part that we need to look at. And okay, just a little more stuff that doesn't really pertain to this, but let's get to the good stuff. Although this will tell you why you don't want to mess with a judge. Might be worth reading. So anyways, the site said go to this Lord Coke book, and so if you just do this, very simply, just Google Institutus of Laws of England, you'll come to this page in Wikipedia. And if you go to the bottom, all 4 institutes are available from Google Books. First part, second part, third part, fourth part. The one I'm going to show you is the 4th part, number 8. That's what we're going to look at now, although they're probably all really, really good to read. But this is the one that had the sections in that Blackstone was referencing. Well, what is this book? The 4th part of the Institutes of Law. The jurisdiction of courts. That's interesting. I don't know what Proverb 22:28 is. When I get done, I'm going to go look it up. Our friend Edward Koch. And just real quick, look at all the courts. Now this back in the 1600s. Look at all these courts that existed. Well, you would think it'd start with the highest and go to the lowest. So, the first one is the Court of Parliament. And then the Council, Board, or Table. Power, authority of the Proctor. Court of High Steward. There's that Star Chamber. The Court of Redress. The Court of the King's Bench. The Court of Chancery. The Court of Common Pleas. The Court of Exchequer. And. I really like this one. Number 14. Of the first fruits and tenths, ecclesiastical. That's the Pope's share of your family. They get the first born fruit and 10% of the rest in the way the system is set up. So, that's just interesting. Okay, let's move on to what we got to look at. Come on, baby. $83. Actually, right there. Bear with me. Get this so we can see it, or so I can see it. No fun getting blind. Okay, a most noble, honorable, revered assembly of the king and his privy council in the king's court or palace. So, the county court is actually your court. You're the king, that's your court. With this council, the king himself does sit at his pleasure. These counselors, like good sentinels, watchmen, consult for the public good and the honor, defense, profit of the realm. It is called a council table. Private causes, left as they should, lest they should hinder the public, they leave to the justice of the king's courts of justice, and meddle not in them. So the council doesn't mess in the day-to-day stuff. It's got a bigger job. And again, this is talking about, but in ancient times there was 12. So in days of old, there was the king and 12, Jesus and the apostle. And they would have 4 properties, knowing he would never be provident for him, that would not be a good husband for himself, that he should not be greedy man, yada yada yada. Anyways, he's a good guy. He's not after the king stuff. He's but number 4 here, that he, in the place the king shall employ him, that he be expert. Need an expert in real estate law. For great offices are never managed by deputy, where the officer himself is but a cipher. The dude's a code. We need the code to break this Gordian knot that Blackstone talks about, that's been tied because of these conveyances that have been so perverted when they corrupted feudal law to put them together and said, hey, we're going to call your body land and we're going to register it. Used to be it was just the ground outside, right? Now they're registering your body. Hence the certificate of live birth, which will show received by a local registrar within a few weeks of your birth. Moving on. So these counselors are due honor, reverence to be given, for they are incorporated to the king himself and bear part of his cares. They are his true treasures and the profitable instruments of the state. Such honor was given to counselors of state in ancient time, that if one did strike, I guess at senator's or counselor's house, or elsewhere in his presence, he was fined. So you don't mess with the people that are the public officers. When you go to them as a king, you want them to be there. Okay, so this talks about a guy who kind of did wrong. Again, I'm going to leave you all to read most of this. I just want to pick out the high points. Hope I can remember them all. The duty, so now we talk about the privy councillor. The duty of the privy councillor appeareth by his oath, which containeth of these articles or parts. And again, this is the same thing that Blackstone had in his words, just being told again, it looks like there's 5, 6, 7 parts. By force of this oath and custom of the realm, he is the privy councillor without any patent or grant during the life of the king that maketh choice of him. So again, whatever not having a patent or grant is important. We need to find an officer that has not been given a patent or a grant. And so these people are the ones who have a wage, if you want to call it, attached to their position. So if you look at an elected official, it'll say how much they get every year, right? So every privy councillor have a voice or place in the court of Star Chamber. However, there is no Star Chamber. However, there still is the Privy Council, because the Star Chamber used to be a Privy Council, so this Privy Councillor has a voice there. And again, there used to be a president. Apparently there is again. I'm not too concerned with who the president is. I'm trying to find the councillor. By Act of Parliament, naming the presidents, the office was never granted but by letters patent, right? So this guy, the president, has a letters patent. So he can't be our man anyways. Make sure you don't miss this guy. Next to the president of the council sitteth in the council and the Lord of the Privy Seal, who besides his oath of a privy councillor. So if you're in the UK, the Lord Privy Seal is a privy councillor, taking a particular oath of the Privy Seal, which consisteth of 4 parts. And here's the other ones: that he be cunning in his discretion, yada yada yada. The big thing is the Lord Privy Seal, who besides his oath of privy councillor has taken some more. Now, the Privy Seal, in my opinion, in America, is the seal of the court of record. That's your court, so that's your private seal of that court. So everything happens within the court, as we'll find out. But in the UK it could be different, because in England their system was set up this way. Go find the guy who's the holder of the Privy Seal. So this is an office of great truth and skill, and he put this seal to no grant without good warrant, no warrant, if it be against law, undue, or inconvenient, but the first he acquaint the king therein. Upon the Lord Privy Seal are attended 4 clerks of the Privy Seal. Now how and in what wise the king's grants, writings. So anyways, this guy has 4 clerks working for him. Okay. And, just more stuff. Now, one of the problems with this is it has a fair amount of Latin in it. I can't read Latin, and I'm tired of trying to type this crap into Google Translator. But if somebody knows anybody who can read high Latin, it would be a wonderful thing if that man would read this stuff, or woman, and put it on a tape and send it out to their brothers and sisters. Are 4 in number, attendant upon the king's principal secretary, who always has the keeping of the seal of the signet, or sealing the king's private letters. There are 4 clerks sit at the secretary's board. Secretary is an interesting word. It actually, in old times, was the clerk of the secrets. That's why they called him a secretary. Okay, and if you guys want to read this stuff, I'm going to go slow enough. You can stop the tape for a second, read it, or you can download the book. Since I didn't have any way to highlight this, I can't remember all the places I wanted to touch on, so we're just rolling through it. And I'm sure I'm going to miss something and wish I had put it on there, but well, we do what we do what we do. Some of the rules of the council, which the council we have observed, we will add. First, that it, to give king counsel, when he demanded, that it, I guess it seateth, I don't know. Secondly, the truest and best counselor is ever given to a king, when the question is so evenly propounded as the counselor knoweth not which way the king himself inclineth. Thirdly, that for resolution, that there never go upon deliberation or execution before for resolution, there should never go before deliberation, nor execution before resolution. So things got to go in a certain order. Okay. And so anyways, when this gets going, this council is going to sit down and have a talk. And there used to be 12. I don't know if there still is or not. No Lord of Parliament takes any place or presidency in respect he is a Privy Councillor in respect, but under that degree such place a Privy Councillor shall take as it is set down in the something or other. So, it ain't helping me because it's more about England and I'm looking for the states. And then here's, we're going to start going through the courts here, the different courts. The Court of the High Steward. The Court of Star Chamber. And so if you read this one on Star Chamber, you're going to get an idea of, even though they say it doesn't happen anymore, what's going to happen. But I'm not going to read it because I want to get to, I'm trying to find out who to send this to get the thing going. What they do, I care not. I just need to get the paper in the right man's hand, saying the right thing, and let him run with it. So let's look at this one. The Court of the King's Bench. So Bracton, who's even older than Lord Coke, doth make in few words notable expression of this court. I wish I could read Latin. And soon after, speaking of the justices of this court, faith. But man, when they start using faith in their documents, you really want to pay attention. Britain had something to say about faith. Fleda had something to say about court faith. I wish I could read Latin. If anybody could translate this, it'd be a wonderful day for Rob Ryder. But in the Black Book of the Exchequer, it is thus said of the Chief Justice of this court, something. So in the Book of the Treasurer, it says something about this Chief Justice. And so Bracton said that the king has committed and distributed all of his power of judicial to several courts of justice, and therefore the judgment must be something. And herewith do agree diverse acts of Parliament, book cases, some whereof for illustration we will briefly remember and leave the judicious reader to the rest. That the laws ecclesiastical and temporal were and yet are administered, adjudged, and executed by sundry judges. For the pleasure of God and quietness of our subjects, as to save our conscience, and to keep our oath, by the assent of our great men and others of our council, we have commanded our justices that they shall henceforth do even law and execution of right to all subjects, rich and poor, without having regard to any person, No regard of person. That's what the Creator says, too. He has no regard of person, or no respect. Without letting do right for any person. Without letting. I had to remember, letting had a particular meaning that I forget it right now, but it was in our favor. To do right of any letters or commandment. Which may come to them from us or from any other or by any other cause. And it agrees with the great canon, which is in Latin. Can't read that. The king has committed all his power judicial, some in one court and some in another. So it's saying the king took all of his power and put it some in one court and some in another, in two different courts. So as if any would render himself to the judgment of the king, in such case where the king has committed all his power judicial to others, such render would be to no effect. So if you go try to get remedy from the king, or for yourself as the king, in a court where the king has no jurisdiction, you're not going to get any remedy. That would be the court of chancery. The king doth judge, because the court of chancery is an ecclesiastic court. And we'll get back to that in a minute. The king does judge by judges, the king having distributed his power judicial to several courts. And the king hath several. Well, they just said two. It was one or the other. Now they say several. I think several is more than one, so I guess that's two. And the king hath wholly left matters of judicature according to the laws to his judges. So the king doesn't get involved in the law is laid down, and he leaves it being carried out to his judges. And this is interesting. And albeit it be enacted that a delinquent shall be fined at the will of the king. Go look up the definition of delinquent. Right now, that's what you are. That's what I am. We're delinquents. Haven't paid our bills. We haven't set off the debt against our estate, and we have the ability to do so. So the second conclusion is in that in those days, this court of King's Bench did follow the court, and therefore Bracton calleth it something because it sat in the king's hall. So it followed. The court of the King's Bench followed the court. Well, the court was the king, because the king's the fountain of all justice. And at the time, that's all there was. Just one. Britain called us justice of this court, and gave names to them. The third is that it is called the King's Bench, and the pleas thereof. Because in this court, those, and therefore the king himself cannot be judge. Okay, so again, it's called the King's Bench, and there's certain pleas, and because of the court, the king can't be the judge. The judge is judge. And fourth is that under these words are included three things. First, all pleas of the crown, as matters of treason, felony, and other pleas of the crown, aptly called whatever, because they are whatever. Secondly, regularly to examine and correct all manner of errors in fact, I think that is, and in law, and of all judges and justices of the realm, in their judgments, process, proceedings, in courts of record, and not only pleas of the crown, but in all pleas shall real, personal, and mixed, and that's what we have. We have real, personal, and mixed. That's what our plea is. The Court of Exchequer accepted, as hereafter shall appear. The Court of Exchequer is the court that the treasurer has. And actually, the Exchequer's court is interesting because it says it gets its law from three different sources. I think it's common law, equity, and natural law. I've never seen a court that says that, they take theirs from natural law, but apparently they do. That jurisdiction over natural law, go figure. Okay. And this is to the king in this court, for regularly no other court has the like jurisdiction, and therefore may be well called. And there's two be of high and sovereign, and these two be of high and sovereign jurisdiction. So there's two courts, again, and these two be of high and sovereign jurisdiction. So there's two courts that have split the king's power. Thirdly, this court hath not only jurisdiction to correct errors in judicial proceedings, but other errors, misdemeanors, extrajudicial tending, and a breach of the peace. You know, so they're talking about a freaking court of record here. They're talking about the circuit court. Because in a minute, it's going to say it's in the county. Is if any person be committed to prison, this court, upon motion, ought to grant a habeas corpus, and upon return of the cause, do justice, relieve the party wrong. So if you're trying to get somebody out of jail, take it to a court of record, to the circuit court, to your habeas corpus. That's where you would take it to. Not to a federal court, not to a district court, to a court of record, to the Chief Justice, as a public record, and tell him you want the body. Or we're just going to try to get out and be done with it. And this may be done, though the party grieve had no privilege in this court. It granteth prohibitions to courts temporal and ecclesiastic to keep them within proper jurisdiction. So the court of record is over chancery court. It's over all courts to make sure that they stay within their jurisdiction. So it is the Supreme Court. Because a court of record under seal, an order from that taken to the Supreme Court, they can't overturn it. And if a free man in a city, burgh, or town corporate be disenfranchised unjustly, albeit he hath no privilege in this court, yet this court may relieve the party, as it appeareth in James Bagg's case, whatever it is. So you can take your stuff to him. Fourthly, this court may hold plea by writ out of chancery of all trespasses done or replevins. And you can go read some more. Fifthly, this court have power to hold plea by bill of debt, detinue, covenant, promise, and other personal actions, yada yada yada. If the officers have been bad. So if you're not getting somewhere, you do want to go to the court of record. You know, you have these documents you're carrying around now. If you're doing your property, have the seal of the court of record on. Know what that means. That they're superior to all other courts. Leave conjecture some of therefore to themselves, we think, the common bail. Okay, and in these courts, none but sergeants of law can practice. And a sergeant of law is a step above an attorney. That's who these counselors at law are. They actually take a second test some years after being in the business. And the proceeding in that court for a long time and under so many honorable judges and revered sages of the law has gotten such foundation as cannot now, without an act of parliament, be shaken. It's so old, so established, they can't shake it, and that there is no act of parliament that's going to shake it. And the errors in the King's Bench cannot be reverted, but in the High Court of Parliament, as before in this chapter of court, of the Parliament appeareth. So I think when they talk about this Court of Parliament, they talk about the Supreme Court of Michigan, or the Supreme Court of the United States. You know, that's who that is, right? It's the High Court of Parliament. Sixthly, if a writ and recall action be abated by judgment in the Court of Common Pleas, and the writ of error, judgment is reverted to this court. The writ is a judge good. The court shall proceed upon the writ, and not restrained by Magna Carta. The court may hold pleas of a seize of novel dissension. Those things that look like F's are actually S's. And so if you Google that, you'll find out that it's It has to do with your property being taken from you unlawfully. Without patent. We don't have the patent. The patent's sitting in the background someplace. We have a land patent to our body that came from the hospital. It's got your footprints on it. It was given to you by your sovereign father from the union of your mother and father. They provided the earthen vessel. That's what was registered. Okay, chancellors, treasurers taking the justice. Okay, ancient times where pleas were held in Parliament, these parties descended to issue according. The record was adjourned into the King's Bench and tried there. By these statutes, the Chancellor and the Justice of the King's Bench were to follow the court, but notwithstanding, both the Chancery and the King's Bench were at times settled courts during several terms of the year, as infinite records both before and after the statutes do appear. So at this time, they did not attend the King's Court when they called. They were accounted as parcel in the King's household as long as they followed the court. But this cumbersome attendance wholly ceased in the reign of Edward III, I guess it is, and yet the Lord Chancellor would have his pursuance as if he had continued still as one of the household until he and all others, but those of the King's, Queen's, and Prince's household only, were restrained by Act of Parliament. So they're saying that, to me, that the Court of Chancery isn't part of the King's household. It's not part of the Court of Record. And upon perusal, until the end, the court sat where other courts of justice did sit. Well, if they sat where other courts of justice did sit, I don't know if that means it could be the same people or not. And the pleas were, because these guys can wear more than one hat. And this appeareth also in elder times, henceforth thus suffice to prove and make of the said act, and long before the court in terms sat the King's other courts, especially for pleas of the crown, and that of said fact to be intended, the Chancellor and the judge of this court should attend the King and follow the court when they were required. Now, the funny thing is, look at the way this Chancellor is written. If you go look that up, I believe that you're going to find that that is what the Exchequer was called back in the time, the Treasurer was called back in the time of Lord Coke. So it was the Treasurer and these judges that went around with followed the court. Not the Chancery Court. It is truly said that the justices having supreme authority, the King himself sitting there as law intends, there be more than justices in Erie. You know, go Google justices in Erie. I wonder if I got that up here. Let's see what did that say? Oh, okay. English law, first of all, that assize of nova decission we saw earlier was an action to recover lands which the plaintiff had been decised or disposed of. The action became extremely popular due to expediency. Rather than dealing with the issue of lawful possession, it simply asked whether the dispossess had taken place, in which case the property was restored to the plaintiff and the question of true ownership was dealt with later. But they say they abolished it, whatever that means. So Erie, judges of ire, a journey, justice of ire were internet judges who were sent once in several years, or 7 years, with general commission to diverse counties to hear determined cause, as were called pleas of the crown. So it's the traveling circuit judge. That ain't the one I'm looking for. Getting too many things open here. So the justices in this court are the sovereign justices of oyer and terminer, gaol, delivery, conservators of the peace in the realm. In this court, the kings of the realm have sitting in the high bench, and the judges of the court on the lower bench at his feet. But judicature only belongs to the judges of the court, and in his preference, they answer all motions. So, to me, they're saying that Jesus is sitting there as the king, and that these particular offices are acting as the apostles to carry out the Creator's wishes. Or it's us. Because at the end of the day, if you're a man filled with the Holy Spirit in the name of Jesus Christ, well, then you're a God. So if Jesus is the one, and he called himself the Son of Man, and other people called him the Son of God, well, if the Son of Man equals one, and the Son of God equals one being Jesus, if you made that an algebra problem, then man equals God. Now, the justices of this court are the sovereign coroners of the land, and therefore, where the sheriff and coroners may receive appeals, the justices of this court may do it. So, the coroners. Now, this is where it all started for me. Back in May, I was out looking for the common law coroner, because the common law coroner is the protector of the king's property and keeper of his pleas, the keeper of his orders. And as strange as it seems, people went out and looked for him. One of the duties that only a coroner can have, a common law coroner, is to recover drowned bodies. And if you go to the Sheriff's Association for Michigan, it talks about the duties of a sheriff, and then it talks about recovering drowned bodies, and then it has this caveat to the side talking about the Magna Carta and all this other stuff, right? Well, it's the same in Texas. So a brother in Texas, back in June or so, he went looking for the common law coroner, went to the sheriff's office. Of course, got the crazy bug-eyed look first. You're looking for the medical exam. No, I'm looking for the common law coroner. I want to know who recovers drowned bodies. That's who I want to talk to. Until the sheriff's office finally relented and said, look, we just assist in recovering drowned bodies. Here's the guy that's in charge. And they gave him a magistrate's business card or something to that effect. So this guy went to see him. And he asked him, he said, are you the common law coroner? And the guy said, well, that's not my title. And the brother said, well, I don't care what your title is. I want to know if that's your office. If you are, I would like to accept your oath, and I would like to set up an appointment to stop to see you. And so the guy handed him a business card and says, well, here, you're going to have to call to make an appointment. And the brother said, well, I already have your card. They gave it to me to find you here. And he said, well, this one is unlisted. But the brother never called. Right? So there you go. I mean, didn't know how close we were at the time. He was probably talking to, because he said he was a low-level magistrate, but if we went to see what court he worked in, that would give you an idea where these coroners are. But again, if probate handles wills, and we think of everything death, right? Well, isn't that where the coroner would be? Are you dead or alive? When you come in with your record of birth, accepted as a deed saying that you're alive, then, they'd have to rebut that. And so supreme is a jurisdiction of the court that if any record be removed, now this is interesting, listen to this. And so supreme is the jurisdiction of this court that if any record be removed into this court, it cannot, being as it were in his center, be remanded back unless it be by act of parliament. So the records for this court are not kept in the court. And if you listen to the conversation with Tom and Rich, I hope we had it recorded or we had it separate because I've talked to them separately. They were saying that they were told, I think Rich said that the chief judge of probate who called him back and called him by his first name on the phone, said the records for the probate aren't kept in the court, they're kept in an attorney's office, and they gave him the name of the attorney who's in charge of them. So those records aren't in the court, and this is saying that these, for what we're looking for, it's a court where the records aren't in the court. Well, in the circuit court, the clerk of the court of records has those there. So I don't think it's the circuit court, because they have a chief justice also. There's two chief justices. There's one for the probate court in Michigan, and then there's one for the circuit court in Michigan. And the funny thing is that the one that's the chief judge for the circuit court, his name is listed with all the other judges when you go to the website. When you go to find the chief justice of the probate court, he has his all by himself. I find that very interesting, that he has his own web page. Not page, but you get my drift. He's listed by himself. And his court doesn't have any records in it. They're kept somewhere else. When they come in, they don't go back out, is what they're saying. Okay. Well, and we can read on. So what he's doing as he's reading this, because he said that your sovereignty is split between two courts, I think he's talking about two courts at the same time in different sentences. Sometimes he's talking about the probate court, sometimes he's talking about the circuit court. They're both part of the same court, because I gotta find this thing here. What did it say here? In the Michigan Constitution, the judicial power of the state, small s state, is vested exclusively in one court of justice, which shall be divided into one Supreme Court, one Court of Appeals, one trial court of general jurisdiction, known as the Circuit Court, one probate court, and courts of limited jurisdiction that the legislature may establish by 2/3 vote of members elected to and serving each house. So all that makes up one court. Probate is one part of that court. The circuit court's a part. The Court of Appeals is a part. The Supreme Court is a part. And I think that some can play more than one part. Okay. Out of this court are other courts derived, as from one fountain several springs and rivers, in respect to the multiplicity of cases which may be increased. I guess that's saying. So if you remember the table of contents, look at all those courts, right? Well, they all came out of one court. They're all part of one court. They're part of the King's Court. The justices of this court have no commission, letters patent, or other means to hold pleas. Well, there you go. They don't. Whoever the justices are of this court, they don't have a letter patent, or commission, or grant. But their power is original and ordinary. So they have original jurisdiction, and ordinary means they have ecclesiastic jurisdiction. They were called anciently something. The Chief Justice, something. I really like to know what this stuff says, but I can't tell you. Because it says, to observe the changes of these names and the reason and change thereof is worthy of observation. I'm sure it is. I'd like to know what this is saying. But it goes on. So before the reign of some king, the Chief Justice of this court was created by letters patent, and the form thereof, here's an example. So before a particular king's reign, they were by letters patent. And this is just an example of one of these guys that was. So here at the end it says that Elizabeth I, being a wife and prudent prince, knowing that something or other, made 3 alterations by limitation of his authority, by changing something to something, by new creation, by writ, left, he had continued his former manner of creation, he might. So, by a new kind of creation, viz., by writ. And our owner certificate of title, certificate of live birth, is a writ. Chris in Canada from El Salvador looked at his. It has 2 initials on it that when you look them up to see what they are an abbreviation for, says it's a writ of an infant. And then here's the problems. You got concealers that are endeavor to swallow up cathedral churches and ecclesiastic possessions of churchmen, livings, and many others of the king's subjects. Yada, yada, yada. So we had all these problems. But now on the other side, to show the great hope there is, the suits of law shall decrease, that in effect all particular causes of the increase of them are taken away, which we have thought good to remember. So these were things that were put in as a remedy. Given a plenary salve for the whole mischief whereupon or whereof you may read at large in the 3rd part of the Institutes about concealers. So they put in something to deal with the concealers. Informations upon penal statutes are to be heard and determined in their proper counties. So everything happens in the county and not in the courts of Westminster, where vexation swarm of informers who are best trusted, where they are least known, are vanished and turned again to their former occupations. So they held it in the county because when you brought it into town, into London, that's where all the frickin' attorneys were, the ambulance chasers. Concerning attorneys, the number are set down, and they ought to be learned and virtuous, and I understand the judge at this time have this matter in consideration. But besides there are some statutes made for avoiding and decreasing of vexation suits. Well, here's one. The petition of right concerning the rights and liberties of all subjects of this realm for their repose and quiet. Lastly, the repeal of many obsolete penal statutes and great mean and diminution of suits. So basically, if you stay at peace, there's no reason to have a suit. That's the whole idea. For the above said general causes, peace and plenty. Long may they happily, by goodness of God, continue without abuse within the realm. The king's bench has authority of great misprisons and offenses to a judge, inflict corporal punishment at pillory, papers, and the like, whereof you may read many precedents in the 3rd part of the Institutes. Page. Okay, so really that is that. And from all that, because in Blackstone's he added the part that this court, whatever, had jurisdiction over idiocy and lunacy, and that's the preview of the probate court, who has a high justice or chief justice, and it's the chief that acts as the cipher. That's why you can't go to his deputies. I believe makes him your privy counselor, and I think it was almost proven to Tom and Rich when the Chief Justice called Rich, called him by his first name, and told him, "Well, you need to come in and see the probate